Hello, welcome to episode 27, Triad Inversion. So, last time we talked about triads, just some basics, and one thing I stressed a lot is that there are names for the chordal members. Remember, each triad has 3 chordal members. And I like to write these out, and I like you to think of these more like a name and not as the actual number. But like, so the root, and the root is like the main note, the one it's named after. And then the third, which again I like to spell out, and the fifth, rather than write the Arabic numeral 3 or 5. Because these are always called the third and the fifth, even though sometimes they are not a third away from anything or a fifth away from anything. And we're going to get to our first kind of taste of that right now. So let's start with the C major triad. I'm going to write a C major triad. I'm going to write the root in blue. I'm going to write the third in green. And I'm going to write the fifth in pink. Look at that. It's a pretty colorful chord. It's the united colors of C major ton. C major ton. It's got a C, an E, and a G in it. Now, we call this a C major triad, right? And we call this root position. In root position, the root is in the bass. What we can do is we can change this around. We can pop this note up an octave. So just like with interval inversion, but now there's more than 2 notes. And these guys can stay in the same place. And now it's still a C major triad, but we call it first inversion. And as you can maybe guess, if we're going to call this first inversion, why would we even bother with the first thing if there wasn't another one? And look, oh my God, there it is. We could pop that third up to the top. And now all of a sudden we have a second inversion chord. So what if we did it again? What if we popped that G up an octave? It'd be up here. And then the C is still here. And then the E is still here. Well, by gum, now the C is the bottom note again. Everything is higher, but it's still the same order it used to be. So we're back to root position. I don't know why I'm putting these in quotes, but I'm trying to be stylistically consistent now. So you got 3 positions a chord can be at. Root position, first inversion, or second inversion. That's it for every triad. Furthermore, root position and first inversion are consonant. You can just have a root position chord hang out and it doesn't have to do anything. That means it's consonant. Remember, in music theory, consonance and dissonance, this one is dissonant, by the way, has to do with whether something has to resolve, whether something has to move somewhere, not whether it sounds bad. None of these are probably going to sound bad to your ear, but in classical music, and in actually lots of kinds of music, these 2 are the only consonant ones. This one is the most consonant. This one is slightly less consonant. And then second inversion chords are dissonant. In classical music, 100% of the time, second inversion chords are dissonant. In fact, when you see this sequence of notes, it's rarely even being any kind of C major chord. When you see it in classical music, way more often you'll see something like this, and it's because these notes are actually going to these notes. And it's about to be a G major triad, right? And we're going to talk about that. In fact, I have a whole great analysis planned of the song Gloria by Laura Branigan, which is all about this thing I'm talking about right there. Just wait till we get there. Okay, we have these other names for these. And this is where stuff gets really confusing. In music theory, we just use numbers for everything, right? We already have our chordal members that have these number-related names. The name of the chord itself has a number root in it. And then you have to remember first and second that have no like direct thing to do with what they mean. And root position, I guess that's easy. But we have this other way of talking about these things, and it's using something we call figured bass. And I'll tell you about figured bass. So figured bass was a historical way of notating chords and has now become a common tool of music analysis. So if I was going to write something like this, and I was in the olden days, I wrote a C, E, G, C, and then I was going to write some figures under them, and I maybe would write something like this. Then if I was a keyboard player and I got this on my part, I would play this with my left hand, and I would just have to know how to realize this figured bass, right? In case I'm not pronouncing this well, figured bass. So basically what it means is a bass line with some numbers under it. The numbers are the figures. The figures have a shorthand to them. We actually have 4 figures here. It doesn't look like it because whenever you have nothing at all, that's short for 5/3. When you have a 6, that's short for 6/3. And when you have a 6/4, well, that's not short for anything. That is what it is. And then here's nothing again. It's short for 5/3. What these show when you're talking about figured bass is the intervals above the bass. So if I was gonna be a piano player or a keyboard player, a harpsichord player, or clavichord player, and I was back in older times, Baroque, before the Baroque, kind of between the Renaissance through the Baroque kind of eras. So I don't know, from like maybe the 1600s through the mid 1700s, maybe starting a little before this would be a common thing. I would know that when I saw, let's start with this last one. When I saw this note, I would want to play a third above the bass and a fifth above the bass. And then I'd have my chord. You can also play the octave above the bass. It doesn't really matter. But see how 3/5, from this C up to this E is a third, and from this C up to this G is a fifth. And if I saw this chord, I would want to play a fourth above the bass and a sixth above the bass. Might be getting kind of low down here, right? And that's another thing. We could play it up here. Or we could play it any combination of these notes. As long as we have the one that's a sixth or a compound sixth, and a fourth or a compound fourth. So you remember, like a sixth above this G is this E. A compound sixth above this G is this E. So this is a major sixth. This is technically a major 13th, but it's a compound major sixth. And you can go back a couple episodes where I talk about compound intervals. They're basically just any interval plus an octave. When we're talking about figured bass, compound intervals are okay. A sixth chord is really a 6/3 chord. 6 is just shorthand for 6/3. And that means it has a third and a sixth. Again, if we were really a piano player, we might play that third and sixth up here instead, as a compound third or 10th, and a compound sixth or 13th. Wait, a compound sixth is a 13th? Yeah, I know how to count. Except I just wrote the wrong notes. That's why I'm getting confused. A compound third would be this G, and a compound sixth would be this C. That's better. And then here again, 5/3, it'd definitely be really muddy if we played them right down here. So probably if we were a keyboard player, we'd play them up here, right? And there's more. For the actual practice of figured bass, any single figure you can repeat the bass note. That is, you can have another instance of the bass note. In fact, you can have another instance of any note, though it's not as common to double any other note. We call it doubling when you have more than one pitch class. So let's say I had a figured bass. Let's do this again. Let's say I had a figured bass just like the one I wrote before, and I had a 6 and a 6/4. And so I know that this means 5/3, and I know that this means 6/3. 6/4 means what it means. This means 5/3. Then my right hand that I would make up on the spot, maybe I would just play it like this. Maybe I would just play the same exact voicing for every one of these. And that would be fine, because look, from C up a third is an E, C, D, E, there it is. Up a fifth is a G, and there it is. And then this C is up an octave, actually a double octave, a compound octave. And then here, E up to G is our third, E up to C is our sixth, even though they're both compound. And then we have a repeat of the E. It's okay, we can do that. And then here, G up to the E is our sixth. G up to the G is an octave, which we don't have to worry about in the figures, because you can always double the root. You can always double the bass. And then G up to C is our fourth. It's technically an 11th, which is a compound fourth, but we can think of it as the fourth. And then this one is more literal. C literally up to the E is a literal third, up to the G is a literal fifth, and then the C is the octave. And this is a totally legit realization of this figured bass line. So why am I telling you about figured bass? Well, like I said, it's an analytical tool, and we basically use it to describe inversions in beginning music theory analysis. Root position is often just called 5/3 position. First inversion is called 6/3 position. Second inversion is called 6/4 position. And then root position, we're back to 5/3. Again, dizzying use of numbers, right? We're already talking about chordal members with numbers. We have numbers that we describe the inversions with. We have figured bass numbers, which themselves have shorthands that have less numbers, but you have to just know the extra numbers. Pretty nutty, right? I'll tell you what though, figured bass, in my opinion, and the opinion of many, hasn't been beat. The way we talk about chords today outside of classical music is more with names. And so here's how we would probably notate these chords today. We'd probably call this a C chord. We'd call this C with an E in the bass, and this C with a G in the bass, and then back to C. So when we just say a chord, we mean a major chord. And a lot of times we use this slash notation where you write the chord and then a slash, and the letter under the slash tells you what the lowest note is. So C over G means C with a G in the bass. That's how we usually notate these things today. Back in the olden days, they didn't think in terms of the root. See, so today we have kind of a root-based naming strategy. But in the olden days, in the language of figured bass, it was a bass-based strategy. That sounds funny to say, right? Bass-based. But so the root is the root no matter what. That's why I did this color coding. See, the root is the blue, and even if it's not the lowest note, it's still the root, right? It's the root no matter where it is in the chord. The bass always means the lowest note. It doesn't matter if you have 3 piccolos playing super high, the lowest one is the bass. So here the bass is a C, here it's an E, here it's a G, here it's a C. And a lot of confusion comes from the way we switch around between bass-based and root-based thinking. Bass-based thinking, we use figured bass to talk about. And we're going to get to what we use to talk about root-based, and it's Roman numerals. And so yet more numbers. Hey, fun. But at least now they're going to be Roman. We will get there probably next episode. So there you go, Triad Inversion. Fun. Bye.